All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Mr. Anderson, and this is part 8 in the series of Heliocentrism and the Luciferian Scientific Dictatorship. It's been quite a while since I did another part of this series. We've done 7 so far, and I plan to do another one soon, and perhaps a ether detour, but let's start on this one here. This is just briefly showing you a high-level cathedral for these Jesuits in New York City. This is a slide from my school presentation. And basically, they use this to headquarter their one world religion. Moving on to these modern-day Jesuits and Catholics and their high-level power structures and what they're doing. Vatican says Catholics should try not to convert Jews, should fight anti-Semitism. Gives you kind of an indication who's running Jesuits currently. The Jewish influence over the Roman Catholic institution and its doctrines is manifest in the document of the Vatican Commission for Religious Relations with Judaism, which states, "We propose in the future to remove from the Gospel of St. John the term, the Jews, where it's used in a negative sense, and to translate it, the enemies of Christ." At a speech at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Roman Catholic Cardinal Joseph Bernardin stated, "There is a need for theological reflection, especially with what many consider to be the problematic New Testament's text. Retranslation and reinterpretation certainly needed to be included among the goals we pursue in this effort to eradicate anti-Semitism. The Gospel of John is generally considered to be most problematic of all New Testament books, and its outlook towards Jews and Judaism. This teaching of John about the Jews, which resulted from the historical conflict between the church and the synagogue in the latter part of the 1st century CE, can no longer be taught as authentic doctrine or used as catechesis by contemporary Christianity, so-called. Christians today must see that teachings can no longer be regarded as definitive teachings in light of our improved understanding." The Council of Trent was an attack on Christianity with anathema after anathema against Christian doctrine that was orchestrated by the Jesuits. The control of the Jews over the Vatican is so complete that Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Benedict XVI, who was the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, issued an official doctrine that the Catholic faith that accepts the Jewish view that the Messiah has yet to come. The document is contained in a small book titled The Jewish People and its Holy Scriptures on the Christian Bible. It is no surprise that this Jewish Catholic doctrine was drafted by a Jesuit named Albert Van Hoy. Vatican says Jews wait for Messiah is validated by the Old Testament. The difference consists in the fact that for us, he who will come will have the same traits of that Jesus who has already come, wrote Cardinal Ratzinger, the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Association of Hebrew Catholics, Shalom HaMashiach. If you are a Catholic, we hope that you will be motivated to learn more and collaborate with us in this work. If you are of Jewish origin, we hope you will join us in providing a collective witness of Jewish people to Jesus and his church. Back to this fellow here, who started the Jesuits, a Spanish Marrano. Okay. August 15th, 1534, they met in the crypt of the Church of Our Lady of the Martyrs at Montmartre, and they took solemn lifelong vows and oaths. Loyola was made the first superior of the order. And in the last video I did was where I was talking about the caves in Manresa where he was torturing himself to see this serpent. So a form in the air near him, and this form gave him much consolation because it was exceedingly beautiful. It somehow seemed to have the shape of a serpent and had many things that shone like eyes. He received much delight and consolation from gazing upon this object, but when the object vanished, he became disconsolate. While Loyola preached, one fell senseless, another sometimes rolled about on the ground, another had been seen in the grip of convulsions of shuddering and sweating in anguish. So they created these spiritual exercises based on the experiences and teachings from the caves of Manresa as a template for what Loyola did to see the serpent, which formed the main foundation for the Jesuits. Systematic meditation, prayer, contemplation, visualization, illumination, all leading to an ecstasy state. Followers were known to levitate off the floor. Sounds like Antoine Mesmer, another small-hatted Freemason. Initiation took 30 days and were brought through with supervisor telling them exactly what to think, feel, and breathe until they were, quote, broken like a horse. They would break the human being down to like a computer where they would monitor your breathing and everything. They controlled breathing with recording and basically machined the human. It was said to take 30 days to break somebody. Further training involved sacrificing the personal will entirely. They were allowed to sin in the name of Jesus, maintained a no responsibility philosophy, maintained a ends justifies the means philosophy, of course, 1% probabilism, and they had something called directing the intention, changing the focus during deeds. So you could actually be killing a Protestant child or something while thinking of something else, and you've trained your brain to process differently. And then the equivocation, mental reservation, and secret doctrines with fake public meetings. So esotericism. Powers given by the Pope to excommunicate all who would hinder or do not aid their story, to confer orders, preach, and administer the sacraments, to change their general, to absolve heretics, to imprison the excommunicate, to excise episcopal functions, to confirm, exercise, dispense, etc., to distinguish themselves, to carry movable altars, to give plenary indulgences, to live exempt and free from secular powers, to be totally tax-free, to be free from any jurisdiction, authority, sentence, and command of any other ordinary delegate, judge, magistrate, or from any search. Above the law, so to speak. And this, of course, this has been revealed a lot lately in the last few years. This is the Jesuit oath, the original one. I promise that and declare I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war secretly or openly against all Protestants and liberals as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate from them the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics. Rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women and crush their infants' heads against the walls in order to annihilate forever their execrable race. When the same cannot be done openly, I will use the secret poison cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, and the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private. I at any time may be directed to do so by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith, the Society of Jesus. So this is why I say that the Jesuits, in my opinion, are one of the top 2 high-level cults of all time as far as the power and influence they could hold over people. Like the old stories where the Templars went to talk to the assassins and Hashishans and all that, and they would snap their fingers and they would dive to their death, and even the Templars were like, dang, how do you get that kind of control over people? The assassins are one of the top 2, in my opinion, for mind control. And the Jesuits are right there with them. And they began starting schools, Jesuit colleges across Europe and other places, including Prague, Czech Republic, Boston, Mexico, France, Spain, Austria, China. And they would be at the core of all these scientific communities. We imbue unto him spiritual forces which he would find very difficult to eliminate later. These forces can come up again to the surface, sometimes after years of not even mentioning them, and become so imperative that the will finds itself unable to oppose any obstacle and has to follow their irresistible impulse, like Manchurian Candidate style. Okay, sorry about that. I had to get a drink of water. So, moving on. From the Boston College website, when in 1547 Ignatius was asked to open a school in Sicily for young men, who were not Jesuits, he seemed to have seen the opportunity as a powerful means of forming the mind and soul. To bring people to God, he sought to form those who in turn would form or influence many others. So that's how they maintained and created such reach. It's a cult within a cult within a cult. The Jesuit connection, the Society of Jesus. In the 18th century, the Jesuits were charged with having an intimate connection with Freemasonry, and the invention of the degree of Kadash was even attributed to those members of the society who constituted the College of Claremont. This theory of Jesuitical Freemasonry seems to have originated with the Illuminati. This idea presided at the foundation of the great religious order, so often at war with secular authorities, ecclesiastical or civil. Its realization was that the dream of the dissident sects of Gnostics or Illuminati who pretended to connect their faith with the primitive tradition of Christianity of St. John, it at length became a menace for the church and society when a rich and dissolute order initiated in mysterious doctrines of the Kabbalah, seemed disposed to turn against legitimate authority, the conservative principle of hierarchy, and threaten the entire world with an immense revolution. That's from Albert Pike, one of the top 2 or 3 Freemason writers of all time. The Jewish people and its Holy Scripture in the Christian Bible. Earlier this year, the Pontifical Biblical Commission published the English translation of the document, The Jewish People and Their Sacred Scriptures in the Christian Bible, the result of 5 years of research and deliberation. A member of the commission outlines the history of the document and discusses its import. So, esotericism and the Christian Kabbalah. 3 types of esotericism funneled through several important scholars of the period. Hermeticism, in connection with Platonist writings, Kabbalah, wrestled from a vast array of rabbinic literature, and magic, culled from ancient and medieval compendia. This is why I always say it's very obvious when someone is promoting this agenda when they're promoting Hermeticism or Kabbalah. The arsenal of spiritual literature was marshaled to placate the restless yearnings of Christian intellectuals to determine a perennial philosophy. All, however, turned to support Christian doctrine. This period also saw a shift away from Aristotelian scholasticism toward Platonic or Neoplatonic idealism. These streams of knowledge did not remain distinct. They were entwined to form what was been called the Hermetic Kabbalist tradition, a movement in thought most significantly affected, as the name suggests, by the literature attributed to Hermes Trismegistus, namely the Corpus Hermeticum and Aesopus, the traditions of Moses, chiefly the oral tradition of the Jews, including the Kabbalah. Blended throughout were notions connected with Plato, especially interpreted by Plotinus, and Pythagoras, the Jewish grandfather to Christianity. Added to this mix was a range of magical practices derived from such works as the Picatrix, the compilations of Albertus Magnus, and various grimoires, including the Raziel traditions and the magical portions of the Corpus Hermeticum. Just a second. Okay. Among these theses was the following: no science yields greater proof of the divinity of Christ than magic in the Kabbalah. Pope Sixtus IV was so delighted with it that he greatly exerted himself to have Kabbalistic writings translated into Latin for the use of the divinity students. Okay, Sixtus IV. And moving on to the Scientific Dictatorship. We tell this story to beginning students in biology as though, and there's a reason why I'm putting this quote, because right after this I'm going into Lemaitre, or however you pronounce his name. I don't care how to pronounce it. We tell this story to beginning students in biology as though it represented a triumph of reason over mysticism. In fact, interesting use of the term mysticism. In fact, it is very nearly the opposite. The reasonable view was to believe in spontaneous generation, the only alternative to believe in a single primary act of supernatural creation. There is no third position. For this reason, many scientists a century ago chose to regard the belief in spontaneous generation as a philosophical necessity. That's a strong term there. Philosophical necessity. It is a symptom of the philosophical poverty of our time that this necessity is no longer appreciated. Most modern biologists, having reviewed with satisfaction the downfall of the spontaneous generation hypothesis, yet unwilling to accept the alternative belief in special creation, are left with nothing. So this is Lemaitre, the guy who would create the Big Bang, a Jesuit. Okay, again, this is all religious. And what is at the core of the Jesuits? Kabbalah. Okay, a cult within a cult. That's why these topics confuse so many people. I thought you said it was the Jesuits. Now you're saying it's the Kabbalists. It's both. He was fascinated by physics and studied Einstein's law of gravitation, published in 1915. He deduced that if Einstein's theories were true, and there had allegedly been good evidence for it since 1919, it meant that the universe must be expanding. And remember from an earlier slide, Democritus is the one who created atheist materialism. And he's the one that said and asserted that space or the void had an equal right with reality or being to be considered existent. He conceived of the void as a vacuum, an infinite space which moved an infinite number of atoms that made up being. And he's the one that created the term atom, by the way, which means uncut or indivisible. The Jesuit astronomer who conceived of the Big Bang. He earned his PhD in 1920 and was ordained in 1923. In 1927, the year he got his PhD from MIT, Lemaitre proposed this theory in which he stated that the expanding universe was the same in all directions. The same laws applied, and its composition was the same, but it was not static. He had no data to prove this. It's just a religious philosophical assertion. In 1929, at the Mount Wilson Observatory in California, Edward Hubble discovered that galaxies were moving away at high speeds. Totally debatable, obviously. He was, like most people, unaware of Lemaitre's 1927 theory, but Lemaitre used Hubble's dramatic discovery as evidence for his theory. It was easy. If you imagine the galaxies rushing away from us as a movie, just run the movie backwards. After a certain time, all those galaxies will rush together. Lemaitre put forth the idea that there was once a primordial atom which had contained all the matter in the universe. So we have baseless assertion made out of baseless assertions that were made out of baseless assertions, and all founded by Kabbalistic Freemasons and Jesuits. And this is their concept here of the Big Bang. Rushing out from this primordial atom, and this is in a nutshell is what they're saying. Evolution and Big Bang, all in one screenshot. And I'll end it with this. Heliocentrism and the Luciferian Scientific Dictatorship. Big Bang brought to you by a Jesuit. Gravity brought to you by a Freemason. Dark matter brought to you by an atheist. Vacuum of space brought to you by a quote-unquote Greek philosopher. Spherical earth brought to you by a Gnostic. Darwinism brought to you by a Freemason. Dinosaurs brought to you by a Royal Society, which we'll go into next. That'll be the next part of this regular series. Atheism brought to you by a quote-unquote Greek philosopher. So these are religious motivated people in my opinion. And there's a blending of all these things. It's the same tribe that's pushing all of these things. So that's why I'm saying it's religious, even though you see the word atheist there. Okay? So on my next one, I'll start to go in on Sir Richard Owen and the dinosaur wars and all that as far as this regular series. Also, what I may do either before that or after the dinosaur one is do a detour into the ether. because that is a religious belief. And I have no choice but to address it because it's directly tied in with all of these religious people and these missions that they promote. It will be called the Ether Detour. It'll still be part of this series, but it will be the Ether Detour. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 videos as a detour. So with that, thank you guys for checking this out. If you like the information, if you like the videos and everything, please like and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. And peace out. Have a good rest of your day.